welcome to this is episode 5, I believe, and we are going to be talking about something very, very important today. But before we launch in, how are you doing?
I'm well. Yeah, I went for a run this morning. I'm feeling good. I'm now moving into training for a 10K now.
That's
If
amazing.
if my knee will hold out and my back will hold out. So I'm also now very much aware of all the rehabilitation exercises that
Mm,
one has to do in between one's training. I've
yeah.
got my ball. You know the what are they called? Those myofascial release balls. That's been working really well. But yeah, I feel great. I am buzzing, and I'm so curious about this conversation around
Mm,
failure because I think it's, from my point of view, from a, client-centered point of view, lots of people won't make changes in their lives because they are so terrified, so at the thought of failure, and so immobilized by the thought of failure because of where, childhood experiences, being reprimanded, being shamed because of having failed and, just been told off, expectations not been met.
mm,
I've had personal I've had personal experience with that. I failed my 11 plus when I was
right.
11 years old. And needless to say, my dad wasn't too happy and there were
Mm,
consequences. And I think that set me off on a trajectory of not really liking failure, but also now getting into the coaching world, sort of appreciating how necessary failure is. And like you, I've done a little bit of improv as
mhm.
well, which I'm sure we're going to discuss. Because it's just been so powerful in helping me to learn how to fail courageously. I think there are major implications. Failure has major implications in how we deal with failure, has big implications on how we also embrace behavior change. So yeah, definitely passionate about this one.
Yeah, me too. So failure is core part of my behavior change model, in the
Ah,
evolved section of the model, because I believe failure is crucial to our evolution. So if you think about what evolution even is, evolution is a series of failures.
oh yes, of course it is.
Mm.
Yeah,
So even just from that Darwinian perspective, so not being able to reach a particular branch of berries, and then the constant failure to be able to reach them led to that bird that was finally able to get to the berries that it wanted. So without failure, we have no evolution. And I think it's really, really easy for us as humans to forget that
yeah.
we can't actually move forward. That if you are not failing, in many ways, you may not be fully living.
Wow, that is so powerful. And it reminds me of something that I put in my hypnosis script for people that fear failure or that have like a lack of self acceptance because they're worried about making mistakes. And that was actually what you
Mm.
said just then. Life needs you to be imperfect because life needs you to make mistakes because life wants to know itself through you. It wants to grow. It
Mm.
wants to evolve. It's constantly evolving. So if you don't make mistakes, how is life ever going to learn how to adapt
Yeah,
and do something different? So life needs you to be a bit messy and flawed so that it can grow and evolve and change and move forward. It's like that ever expanding universe idea that
yeah,
exists within us.
yeah, you're right. I mean, for me, it's completely symbiotic. You cannot look at behavior change without embracing failure and looking at failure in detail. And I think what I would love for people to get from this conversation, which we haven't quite had yet, is just this sense of becoming comfortable with the unknown and becoming comfortable with our sense of failing. And actually, while I'm saying that, something that's come up for me really quickly, and I was thinking about this as you were speaking, is some people might even have a reaction to the word failure. So what I've noticed is we've tried to water this down in society today. You can't tell anyone they failed at something.
Yeah.
We don't use the word failure. We even try and reframe it and say, no, it's a learning process. Whereas I'm all about, let's not get into semantics here. You failed at it. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Because
Uh,
again, it's intrinsic to our growth. And I think, again, where I see that being something that I have a reaction to, particularly, and this is going to be another time where I'm a non-parent talking about parenting, so please, big disclaimer, I am not a parent, but I think it does start in childhood. So if you look at what we do in school now, you can't lose a race.
Yeah.
Everyone gets a badge, everyone's a winner, everyone's done, got A pluses, and it's resonating throughout our whole education system and our whole society, really, where we're very reluctant to tell people that maybe they didn't do something right or that they failed at something. And I personally have a big issue with that. I don't know how, and we're not going to go any further at this point, because I'd love for you to tell me what you think about that.
Well, I think it's because I hear what you're saying, and I'm not in that world either, so I don't really know what is going on in schools, but I have heard this from other people. What, for me, I'm picking up is this kind of like wrapping people up in cotton wool against feeling negative feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's protection against negative feelings. And I do take a little bit of issue with that, really, because it's you're in a very indirect way saying that negative feelings are not valid or shouldn't be felt. But it's black and white, isn't it? It's, in order to know the light, we have to know the dark and all the different shades of grey in between that. I think and that's what makes us human. And I worry that we are creating a generation of people who are robotic or who are avoidant and dissociated from the nuance and the whole kind of rainbow spectrum of feelings. It's like they just want to go to the violets. Well, there's a whole load of red over at the beginning and darker stuff that actually will inform that violet, because there will be red in violet. So you have to, without experiencing all of it, you actually pinch yourself off and you live a very narrow bandwidth of emotionality. So you might not be feeling, I don't know, the feeling of worthlessness that might come with failure, but you're not also feeling joy and elation and euphoria and all the other stuff. So you live in this very kind of bland, narrow bandwidth. So I think what could be useful is just perhaps teaching people how to process difficult feelings rather than trying to protect them from difficult feelings.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, we could go into the semantics of the word, and you can use whatever word you want to, really. But again, what I'm saying is, I think the sugarcoating of failure isn't necessarily helpful, because again, that's a protecting someone from just what isn't, like, there's nothing wrong with failing. That's the key thing. Like, what's actually wrong with that? Because what we've said already, in just very short conversation, is that failing is a part of growth. So you talking about that little band that people live in is the comfort zone, isn't it? And most people don't want to step outside of that. And also, going back to the kind of the idea of parents, I get the sense of deeply, deeply wanting to protect your children from feeling like they failed, and you just want to prevent them from feeling any bad feelings. And yet, again, what you're saying, and I would wholeheartedly agree, for not just for children but for all of us, is that without dealing with that sense of failure, there is no room for growth, and we are not building all of those really beautiful muscles that help us throughout our life, like just being resilient, being able to problem solve. Sometimes only when we fail do we also know what we don't want to do.
Yeah.
So, figuring, you get to have this mirror where you're able to figure yourself out in light of the failures that we have. Like I said, problem solving, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what works for you, how will I tweak and change that? Anyone who's ever accomplished anything great in their lives will have had a series of failures behind them. Fact.
Absolutely. Yeah. And out of failure comes creativity.
100%.
Do you want to diminish creativity? Creativity is the driving force of the universe. of the
Mm.
world, of the, okay, forget the universe, the earth that we live on, planet Earth. If we didn't have problems, we wouldn't have creativity. So they do go hand in hand for sure. I'm curious, Serena, what have you failed in in your life? You knew that was coming.
I was just about to ask you. You've stolen the question. You
We'll
had it
do
written
one
down, and
each.
you got there first. Well, do you know what? I have too many to list. Yeah, I've got too many failures to list. I failed. I consider what I did at school to be a failure because I didn't work hard enough. I didn't get the grades I wanted or think I definitely could have got. I failed a lot in my first year of university, as in, again, not working hard enough, not getting the grades that I really should have got. A lot of my failures I consider in my own life are to do with academia and learning, to be fair. When I think about what failure is to me, there will be other things I've done where I imagine other people I know will perceive me as having failed, but I don't necessarily see it that way.
Yeah.
So, for example, the end of a significant relationship,
Yeah.
I felt like that was a celebration, whereas other people felt it was a failure. So that's interesting, but other people can have a perception of you and what you maybe have failed at. So all I can tell you is I failed a lot, but what I've had to do, because failure in the culture of my family and my upbringing, failing is not acceptable. So I think there are some families that do this better than others,
Yeah.
where failure is just something, again, it's a resilience building exercise. It's an ability for everyone to think about how that could be problem solved. It's made okay in the family culture. It's something that you can discuss openly. Whereas very, very early on in my family structure, I knew that wasn't acceptable. And so failure brought with it a lot of shame, I think, for me, and especially around things like academic work and like how I would conduct myself. I could kind of fail at that in my family, if you like. If I wasn't being a particular person or acting a particular way, I would be like failing my family. So I've had to work really hard to overcome those feelings that I associate with failure, and I have actually really transformed that now. I've quite genuinely, I've worked on not feeling those things like shame and guilt around failure. Now I really do see it. I think if I get the sense now that if I'm failing at something, I'm working towards something that I'm trying. So I have
Yeah.
actually reframed it. I don't know. Yeah. Let me flip that
Yeah.
round. Do you have anything that comes to mind specifically when you think of failure for yourself?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's I've done lots of different. I've always been self-employed, so
Mm.
right. Well, I had when I left school, I worked in a car dealership for a year. Then I was a beauty therapist for
Mm.
a year in a spa, and then I worked in a vocal school for a year, just doing sales. And in between, and then from there on, I've always been self-employed. So I've had to generate my own income. And being a creative person, I've always tried lots and lots and lots of different things. I wanted to be a famous pop star. I wanted to be a songwriter. That you could say failed, but actually from that I learned so many transferable skills, not just about the business of songwriting or business in general and branding, but also about like acoustics and the physics of music and how that actually translates into energy work and psychological work, the of belief systems and how certain conflicting beliefs create an energetic, like I don't know what they call it now, phase lock, which means you don't go anywhere from there. Now that has auditory and acoustic roots, in that when you get two waveforms that are not in sync with each other, they cancel each other out, so you can't actually hear it. And it's the
Oh.
same with like cognitive dissonance and things like that. So, is it a failure that I didn't have a platinum selling album? I've created 2 albums, and I've still got like still got like 1,000 CDs in my mum and dad's garage that are
I've got one.
collecting dust.
I've got one. I remember.
Oh, have you?
You were very in the period. Is it? I'm gonna say the name wrong. Is it Evanescence?
Evanescence, yeah.
Yeah, you were very in that era, and you had a look and feel that was a little bit similar to that in my mind. That's how I remember it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many things. Like I set up a
Yeah.
choir that failed, quote unquote. I tried to
Why did
do,
that fail? Why did that fail in your mind? So, what did failure look like for you with that?
um, I think it was like, for me, the equation didn't match up. So the input output, the energetic equation didn't match up in my mind. And as soon as that happens, I'm like, this isn't working. I'm not going to spend any more time on this. So what I mean by that is the money that I was earning, the money that I was generating didn't match the effort level that I was putting in to try and get bums on seats for the
Right.
choir for the term. Yeah. So had I kept going with it, maybe you could argue, because I only run it for 2 terms, you could argue that it might have got more successful. But in my mind, I could see that actually there was less resistance doing my
Mm,
one-to-ones. So I was like, if
right.
I can just carry on doing my one-to-ones, that works. I don't have to put loads of energy into that.
Mm,
That I know will generate good income. So it's like dipping my toe into things that could have, like, just for my own interest, really. It's like just seeing,
mm,
could that work? But all of these failures help me to really understand that I am such a one-to-one person. Like, I
mm,
love the one-to-one. I feel like I can hold space for people better. I'm not distracted by different personality types. I feel less pressure when I'm doing one-to-ones with people. I can modulate and change and kind of move in and out of different modalities. I don't have to worry about all these different people. And being an
mm,
only child as well, I suppose I never had to like share. I never had to negotiate with other siblings. So I'm very much like in that mindset of don't like distraction. I find it very unnerving and unsettling.
mm.
So yeah, I mean, that's, the multiple, and I set up a talks night in Brighton as well, and I
They were
ran
really
that.
successful,
Yeah,
weren't they?
that was really successful. Yeah, I did that for 2 years, and then I started becoming very burnt out by it. So again, you could
Right.
see that you could say that was a failure because eventually I couldn't get bums on seats because I was so depleted. But again, it made me
Mm,
double down on what I really wanted. It helped me create a stronger sense of identity, which is
mm,
so important for
mm.
decision making in the future and things like that. So, yeah, I've had a lot of failures, but also a lot of insights that have been born from that.
Yeah, and it sounds like you can see because everyone has, 2020 vision when they look back.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see what what those things have done in terms of leading you to other places as well. So I think those things, when you can have that clarity when you look backwards, it's difficult to see those things as failures because you can connect the dots so differently to versus when you're in it and you're actually experiencing that. That in itself is linked to behavior change because again, this is when I keep talking about behavior change as a muscle. This failure muscle, which is a part of the muscle of behavior change, gets worked when we fail more. We become more comfortable with it. We have more comfort in knowing that that's going to lead somewhere, that
Yeah.
actually down the line it will all work out. So it's one of the reasons it's really difficult to tell younger people to not do things, or um it will all work out in the end. Doesn't really wash when you're in it and you haven't built that muscle yet. You don't know that things work out maybe for the best or better down the line. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It really, really does. I mean, even now, like, because when you're in it, it can be
Mm,
so unnerving and destabilizing. So for me, like, if I haven't got any inquiries that are coming in, occasionally I get these really quiet spates in my business where nothing's
mm,
coming in, and I'll be like really worried. and just like really panicked and scrambling and scratching around like, oh my God, I've got to send an email or create an offer, or and it gets quite, and then eventually it can feel quite personal, like I am a failure, no one likes me, people think my RTTs are crap, all this stuff that is going around. And I just have
Yeah.
to think to myself, Sally, you've been doing this for 7 years, and you've
Yeah.
always in that time had clients coming back. They will
Yeah.
find you. So it's like just sinking into that trust, and it's being able to hold on to two emotions at the same time, I think. So for me, it's
Yeah.
like a strategy that I use to help myself deal with failure in the moment, especially around the business, is okay, I can hold the difficult emotion of being in it, but I can also hold the hope and the
Mm,
trust, and
love
I can
that.
look back and I can see the pattern
Yeah.
of how it's recovered in the past. And also I can take that feeling of nervousness and put that energy into trying to find a solution, like
Mm,
talking to people, maybe having meetings with marketing experts. I've done that recently, and I've now got like a nice little new marketing source, which is great, and that's really, really helped. So as I say, these things all go towards all your failures add into the creativity, which goes towards problem solving.
yeah, and something that's really come up for me as you're speaking, and it's a little conversation that links to something we were talking about before we came on air, so they say.
Mm.
It's this idea around, obviously probably people listening are very clear on the fact that Serena is advocating for the fact that we should embrace failure because it's a good thing. I mean, failure doesn't always feel good. With that said, depending on where you were at, so it goes right back to what I talked about right at the start of the series, really in series 1, around, when say if you're working with someone who's embracing change, you have to meet someone where they are at in their life currently. So depending on where they are emotionally, spiritually, physically, financially, that we have a different kind of tolerance or resilience towards failure as well. So there are times when we deal with failure better, essentially, depending on where we are,
Yeah.
versus other times as well, because sometimes failure doesn't seem to affect us in the same way that it might at a different stage in our life, or depending on how much meaning we put on something, so there are so many other factors that also play a part in how that may actually affect us and affect us going forward.
Yeah,
um
so true. So true,
yeah,
depending on what stage of life we're at.
yeah,
If we're in a relationship, if we're not in a relationship, what's happened that day, what
yeah,
we've eaten, what our blood sugar's like, if we've not feeling very resilient, if we're exhausted, all of that is going to have an effect on our tolerance to the difficult emotion of failure. And I think that's why people avoid it, because it's a difficult feeling to withstand, and it does
yeah.
require a little bit of resilience to white knuckle it.
Mm. And for me, again, another going back to something I said earlier, which I think is worth maybe just kind of digging down on a little bit, is this idea that there are different perceptions of failure. So not only just between us, we perceive it differently, but if you're in close relationships with people, for example, as I said, I had a relationship that ended, that I considered a successful part in, let's
Yeah.
say, whereas other people in my life considered that my failure.
Yeah.
And so, what you're actually dealing with then, and this is where it comes back to you having the resilience within yourself and the tools and the skills in yourself to boldly stand in a place where you own your own life and you are like okay with what choices you have made, and
Yeah.
to not buy into other people's perceptions or ideas or definitions of what failure is.
Yeah, that can be quite tricky, especially if that's
Yeah,
ingrained into a particular family system,
yeah,
the culture of a family and a certain religion as well. And yeah, it requires a certain emancipation in a way of a kind of paradigm, a thought paradigm, or something that a family system or any kind of system is buying into. You have to emancipate yourself from that and like grow your own roots, learn to walk, stand on your own 2 feet in a way.
I thought you were going to say grow your own something else then, but which is also something you might have to do now. Yeah, it's where you have to really, like I said, really own the changes that you're making, and just to be comfortable with the choices that you're making for yourself. It is just, for yourself, for your life, for your future, and to be okay with other people's perceptions of how that might look, like I said, because we all have a very, very different definition of what failure actually is. So
Yeah.
what, and that comes from all of the things that we allude to all the time, and we've mentioned many times, your upbringing, your family, where
Yeah.
you are in terms of time and space, culture, expectations that you hold. So many things influence what you even perceive to be a failure in the first place. Is there anything, for example, that you are, like, how do you relate to failure now? What would feel like a failure? That's quite a big question. You don't have to answer it. What would feel like a
Um,
failure to you at this point in your life?
what would feel like a failure? I don't know. I mean, the thing that came to my mind, I suppose, was lifting, going into the gym and lifting a weight that was too heavy for me. But I talk about this with my trainer all the time. You have to put your muscles into failure. So
Yeah,
this
you
is
do.
an analogy for how
Mm,
it works physiologically. So,
definitely.
we work on one part of the body per session. I don't do like a total body workout with her. So, for example, you're working on chest, you're doing the bench press, and through the whole session, your muscles are getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker until the end of the session. When you go into failure, you just cannot lift that weight anymore, and then bang, you're done. You're done for that session. And
Mm,
then, of course, so you go home and you wait for those muscles to recover. The next day, they flipping hurt.
yeah.
Like your arms just feel like they're up here and
Mm,
everything just feels really tight.
mm,
But because you know that you've done that deliberately, you have deliberately put your muscles into failure so that they will grow and adapt. It's
mm,
like a hurt that you can cope with. You
yeah.
voluntarily do that to yourself
Yes,
to
yeah.
become stronger. And I always come back to that analogy of how the muscles get stronger. I just think muscles are amazing how they adapt so quickly.
Mm,
And I find now, like, I've been kind of on this path for since January, working with this particular trainer, but doing the intermittent fasting since November. And I'm just amazed now at how much more adaptive and responsive, like quickly, my muscles have become. So, for example, like my butt muscles are typically, they don't recruit very quickly. And that's what stops me from improving my deadlifts. And the reason they don't recruit is because I sit on them too much. Right. So, what I've noticed is now I know that I have to work my butt muscles a bit more. I'm noticing that they are because my whole body has been going through that training process. My butt muscles are recruiting so much quicker than they ever used to, even though they
mhm.
are really lazy and they haven't recruited quickly in the past. Now they're getting the message because of all that failure that I'm sending them into.
Right.
Yeah. So,
You're talking about something there where you're actually embracing failure because you can see the progression.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What
And
was the
that's,
original question?
no, you took it somewhere completely different, but it's still relevant.
Phew.
I said, what would you consider if something like what would you consider a failure in your life right now? Because again, I think just kind of going back to the fact that as we grow and change,
Ah,
and as you become more comfortable with failure, which I am, there would still be things that I would consider that I could fail at.
well,
Well, I
yeah.
don't necessarily want to. So what I'm trying to illustrate, I guess, is you become comfortable at it, but failure, although you might become comfortable with failure, the failing in and of itself in the time that you're at in your life will still feel hard.
Yeah.
And again, that's because the growth, if there's true growth always happening, what you're not doing is what people sometimes do, for example, is they fail within their comfort zone.
Yes.
Does
Yeah.
that,
Oh,
just
I see what you mean.
still,
Yeah.
that's still, so my point is, if you're actually really failing, although it's a muscle that you build and it becomes easier, something about failing will never be easy. It's always
Yeah.
challenging. Otherwise, you're not, are you really failing? Or are you just appropriately failing for social media? Not you, but do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I failed at this, or I didn't do so well. Oh, boo hoo, poor me. That's, well, no, I don't really think you failed then, love.
Mm.
So, do
Not
you
a
see what I
proper
mean? So,
failure. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm saying, although you become, yeah, again, I'm just kind of repeating myself, you grow the muscle of failure, and failure in itself becomes comfortable because you are comfortable and you have an okayness with the concept of it. And yet, you cannot deny that if you're truly failing, something about it will always feel bloody hard because you failed
Yeah.
at something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, I have to seek that discomfort in failing to feel like I'm still growing. Like, so that for me looks like still challenging myself in my business, still putting myself out there on the line, still
Yeah.
pushing myself towards, like, I want to sign up for another triathlon.
Wow.
I'm really scared of failing at that. I could fail. I honestly believe I could get halfway through like the run and want to die.
Yeah.
So, but do you see what I'm saying? So there's a growth aspect to failing, and to not be afraid of putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, as a value, that feels really important that I do that, and that I'm not afraid of something not going the way I want it to go. So
Yeah.
like avoiding that controlled failure.
Yes.
Yes.
I hear what you're saying, and yeah, so many kind of ideas bouncing around in my head.
Right. So talk to me,
Um,
Sally.
well, I think one of the, yeah, I mean, it's hard for me at the moment because I'm in a phase in my business where I am not actively creating offers, putting stuff out there. I'm in a acquiring phase,
Love it.
yeah, to use your
Yeah,
terminology.
love it.
But I know that eventually there will probably be something that I need to do to launch, say, new product that will require some kind of public speaking.
Ah,
Um,
right.
so I haven't done any public speaking for a long time, and actually this will play into comedy improv. So, all right, I'm going to be really, really honest. Like right now,
Yeah.
I'm sweating
Oh,
because
you're
I'm going to be
rolling your
honest.
sleeves up. Oh, I
Yeah.
love it.
So I'm going into failure right now.
You're having a moment. This is big. Oh, drum roll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, I will. So a couple of years ago, probably 2021, I was doing on a face. I was on an Instagram live with another menopause coach, and my mind went blank.
Right.
Okay, I froze. I went into freeze mode, and then it started happening all the time. Like anytime I did any kind of live public speaking that was improvised, I would go
Yeah.
into freeze mode. And then I decided that it was too much for me and I was going to stop any kind
Mm,
of thing like that. Because that was like, that was public humiliation, total
yeah.
failure. But I didn't understand the nervous system response at the
Mm,
time. So it was
mm,
terrifying when it was happening and
mm.
it was in front of people. And yeah, it was just awful.
Yeah.
So I kind of decided to crawl into a hole and stay within my comfort zone and just do sort of like podcast recordings and things that could be edited and whatnot. So I know for me that some kind of public speaking that wasn't necessarily memorized, that was more improvised, could be like the way out of that learned behavior, I suppose you could call it.
Mm,
So yeah, I'm not there yet. I mean, what we're doing here and now is really nice. We're riffing with each other. I'm not going blank. I'm able to talk about it, not go into freeze mode and anything like that. But yeah, it's a tricky one because I know that is something that I need to do. And I feel that, and I would love to talk to you about comedy improv, because I only took it so far. You took it to like what I would call like a professional level, where you were, putting on shows, and I came to see you and your troupe in one of your shows in London, which I thought was amazing. It was hilarious. And that's the reason I moved to Brighton, was to do comedy improv.
Wow,
Because,
I've
and
been
I didn't
dreaming.
really, I didn't really do much of it when I got here. But I did end up doing a course, and did a little bit of long form, but found it, quite challenging at the time. I couldn't finish it because I was doing a degree and it all got a bit much. But yeah, so that's sort of like what I would
Mm,
consider to be like a real failure, would be to put myself forward for some kind of like high stakes public speaking event
that.
where I could really like
Mm,
train myself to
mm,
think on my feet. And I'm really
yes.
impressed with you in the way that you do that. I love that about you, because you are on TV and you have to do that on TV. I remember when I went on Matthew Wright's morning show.
Yeah, you
I was just
said that. That's amazing. I need to find this clip.
well,
How
it
do we
was
find it?
just,
You
oh,
got it?
God knows, no, God, I don't even know. Maybe you could, but it was. I didn't go on the panel. I wasn't on the panel. I was in the audience, and
Yeah.
I volunteered to say something. And I was like, looking back, I wouldn't even do that now, right? So
Right,
I must have
that's
had so much,
so good.
what do we like, innocent energy, like sort
Yeah.
of, I don't know, stars in my eyes kind of thing. And the camera was on me, and they were talking about, I think they were talking about Salman Rushdie's Satanic Verses. I
Gosh.
didn't have a clue. I didn't know anything about culture back then.
Oh my
Like,
God, that's deep.
yeah, and the
Mm.
crap that came out of my mouth, I've no idea. Anyway, it's. I think they all just fell about laughing. But yeah, I kind of would like to get back into something like that.
Can I ask though? Obviously, you've also again. This is interesting because what I'm in. It's maybe not slightly off topic, but I did say before. There's also always a difference between your version of something and someone else's perception of that. So
Yeah,
it's, for example, in your world, it's interesting that you would be confronted with public speaking,
yeah,
and yet, if I said to you, "Could you go and sing a song in
yeah,
front of people?" How would you feel about that? Because you've been singing for years in front of people and big audiences on
yeah.
set.
I know.
So is that different for you?
Well, I mean, I haven't sung publicly for a long time. 2019 was my last public gig. Again, just because I don't do it for a living anymore. So I'm not
Right.
practiced. It's not something that I don't practice it. I think it would terrify me actually now. So
Okay.
maybe that's something that I could do to get back in the
Yeah.
saddle.
Yeah. That might be your in, because that might be maybe a little bit more comfortable. Again, the whole reason I said that was there'll be other people thinking, I could maybe say something in front of people, but I could never sing in front of other people. So
Mm,
you doing that looks so brave, and people would think that they would fail in that position, so they view you with a certain reverence around, because you could do that and they couldn't. And so it's,
mm,
yeah,
mm,
interesting to see the difference in perception. I love that. Thank you for
mm.
sharing. So personal. Well, now that everyone knows, and all the podcast listener knows, that we can all check in on you and see how that's going, and see if in a few months' time, maybe in series 3, what's happened as a result.
Yeah.
No, that's really lovely of you to
I
share that. Thank you.
I did do a little bit of public speaking a couple of weeks ago, but it was pre-scripted. I wanted to get a point across. It was a very deep, emotional talk about childhood stuff, and I didn't want to just riff it, because what I wanted to say felt really important just for me to get it out there, and I wanted it to be quite
Mhm,
structured. It's definitely
mhm,
something that I could memorize and do as a sort of TED style talk, probably not at
mhm.
TED or anything like that, but um, yeah, I think there's a difference. So can I talk to you about comedy improv?
Yeah, please do. It's been a game changer for me, so I'm very happy. It was a big part of this conversation in my mind. So yes.
Yeah,
Go-
definitely. So, first of all, maybe you'd like to explain a little bit about what comedy improv is and how
Yeah.
you came into it.
So I grew up like many people listening of our era. I grew up watching Whose Line Is It Anyway and absolutely loved it. I watched it every Friday night when it was on television here in the UK. And was just in awe. It just looked like this thing that, I mean, let's be clear, I never thought I would do it and had no desire to, but I was in awe of it. I couldn't
Yeah,
believe, and I probably like a lot of people, you look at it and you think they're not making that up. That's that they did this before, and
yeah,
they know what the audience is going to say, and they know, and it's all this is a lie. But I love watching it, and I love trying to believe that they're really making it up. Um, and so watched it and loved it. Thought nothing of it. Went to go and live in New Zealand and realised that it was a big part of New Zealand culture. So over in New Zealand, they do what's called theatre sports at school.
oh
So they
yeah,
actually do it in school. And with my then partner, he did it. Um, I was privy then to watching lots of shows, and he did it. He was a really good improviser, and watch him do it. And there was a woman who was part of his group called Madeline Sami. So if you know any New Zealand films, you might know Madeline. She's a well-known actress now in New Zealand and all over the world, actually. She does some great stuff. And particularly seeing a female do it, because there were the very, very few females doing improv. I was really inspired by the whole group, who are incredible, but she really stood out. And I just thought, I can't believe people really go on stage and do that. So it was this combination of cringing watching it and being in utter awe. It's kind of like watching it between your fingers, like, I can't believe they're making this. Oh my god, they're gonna make up a song I almost can't watch.
yeah,
And for me it really came from this, going back to the key part of our conversation today about failure is, up until then, I was deeply petrified of failure. Failure for me meant shame. And that's because I was raised to feel ashamed if I failed at anything. It wasn't something that was acceptable. So this was just failure on crack. This was just like, I cannot believe people are voluntarily putting themselves in a situation where they could fail, and they did fail. And sometimes it doesn't always go to plan, but then the styling out of the failure was a skill in
yeah.
itself. And I just couldn't get my head around it. And then, a bit of a long story short, too late. um, my a lady visited from Canada, and I watched her again. I was always really inspired by particularly the females who did it, because there were so few of them that were really good.
Mm.
And she kept saying to me on this trip over, she was an improviser, she was amazing. She kept saying, and you don't want to do improv, and you don't want to do improv. And she was like really challenging me, because I was the only, like, in this little group of people that all did it and I didn't do it. And again, I finally did succumb, and I did a beginner's course, which was actually taught by my partner at the time, which was really awkward. And it was another reason I didn't want to do it, actually, if I'm honest. But I did it, and it was so challenging for me, because it is the whole point of improv for me. One of the key lessons is embracing failure.
Mm.
You have to be prepared to be the most vulnerable you, because you are going to, in front of many, many, many people, not just have to make things up, but probably go wrong quite a lot.
Yeah, and a
What I
gear
did,
shift very quickly.
oh my god, and think on your feet on another level, like
Yeah,
another level, and hold a narrative, and hold a whole story in your head. So all of these things. So the potential to go wrong is big.
the
There's a
stakes
lot.
are high.
The stakes are very high.
Yeah,
Obviously you can't die from it. This is not like life threatening here, but it's, when you've been raised on shame and feeling like you can really like screw up, it was really scary for me. What I didn't realize is how much I would love it, and it became so freeing, and it just released this whole part of me that I don't think I'd ever been able to embrace before.
mm.
And I just found a complete freedom, and it made me consciously reframe failure.
Mm.
And I think there are so many things to be said about that. Not only are you taught the skills to deal with it differently, to find a true sense of humour in failing, because we can all pretend that we laugh at our failure, but it doesn't really feel funny. But actually, because I'm naturally I like humour, as I've said, play is a core value for me. So I got to embrace that sense of who I was on another level. I could
Yeah.
actually be playful and find failure playful.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is to do with the community. So again, people, surrounding yourself with people whose values are aligned, who join you in the failure and find fun in it,
Yeah.
is so freeing.
And what I love about it
It's
is how they support you as well. So you're failing,
yeah,
you're like having a meltdown, and they swoop in and support you. So it reinforces your trust in life, and that
oh,
people have
so
actually got your
many things.
back.
So many things. I mean, I actually put a post on social media just the other day. I just did 2 hours of press. It was like 2 hours of different radio stations around the country in the UK just interviewing me. So it was one every 10 minutes. I had 8 minutes with a radio station, 2 minutes break, 8 minutes, 2 minutes break, and it was just constant. It was only a couple of hours, but it was quite intense. And I posted it after that on social media, and I just said, for me, it was improv that gave me the skills to do that. Yes, I've got the expertise in murder, and I know it inside out. But if I didn't have improv as the underpinning skill set to doing that, I don't think I could have done it justice. Because it's the thinking on your feet, it's the changing it up, it's the knowing I could go wrong but coming out of that. It's all of those skills that it gives you. So, for anyone listening, if you want and this is why I incorporate a lot of improv in my own training now, because it's one of the things that has given me, I called it the Swiss tool of life skills.
Swiss Army
It
knife tool.
That's it. Sorry, the Swiss Army knife is what I said. Yeah, it's the Swiss Army knife of life skills. If you want just like a life school, go to someone, either do an improv course or go to someone. I taught improv for years as well. I actually just taught it for years. And I actually had a business for 2 years where I just taught improvs to corporates and schools.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I went and incorporated improv into all corporate training and team building and actual training, and also I taught in schools around the country for 2 years, and that's all I did.
Wow.
So I also taught at Eton and
Did
Wycombe
you?
Abbey Girls. Yeah, so I brought it everywhere, and it was really amazing. And so it's why I still incorporate it. I cannot not incorporate it into everything I do. Cannot, because it's just so powerful. Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't have an improv course, by the way. I'm not trying to sell something here. And you can sign up to Serena's Improv, serenasimprov.com. No,
Where
but
do I
honestly,
sign?
it is going to be,
Oh,
it's a big part of any immersive training I do. It just has to be.
yeah.
And it's, change, it's all tied together. It's a beautiful thing.
So, what's happening in the brain? That's what I'm interested in, like from a neuroscience point of view. I don't know if you
Yeah.
know. You probably do, but what's
Well, it will just literally be enhancing your neuroplasticity. You'll be making, because you're forced to think in different ways, you're forced to act in different ways, think in different ways, respond in different ways to what you normally would.
yeah?
You are building new neural pathways by doing that.
So you're
It's like,
pushing. Go on.
no, it's so people think, so obviously things that really, obviously it's neuroplasticity, and understanding it is both simple and complex, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
anything you do that is new will enhance your neuroplasticity, in the sense that you will build new neural connections.
yeah,
And so again, if you're not used to doing things like improv, why, you're naturally going to build those neural networks. You're going to be building pathways in different areas of your brain, or enhancing different pathways as well, like you would if you were learning a new language or learning a new instrument.
yeah,
So just the fact that it will do a lot to enhance that, because it's a new skill and it makes you think very, very quickly, very, very differently. You try, and one of the things that we did in New Zealand, for example, was we performed in New Zealand's first full length improvised musical.
Wow.
And we did a whole series of shows where every night we did performed in a different genre that the audience chose on a little spinning wheel. And we did an hour, I think it was an hour and a half, feature full length improvised musical where we held the narrative for an hour and a half, a full story from beginning, middle, end. And I was nearly always responsible for the song. So a lot of what I did was the teaching of the singing. So I had to be able to start the song, provide the first what's it called? Verse.
Stanza.
Yeah. Then the chorus, and then retain the chorus in my head for when the next person was singing the next verse, so that we could all then re-sing the chorus that I just made up 2 minutes before.
So you're talking short-term memory on steroids. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of people fail at.
Yeah, and so you think about doing that and doing that continuously, what you are actually doing.
Yeah.
And it's changing, you're changing it all the time. So yes, you know, once you've done it for a while, the same neural pathways will be connected. But if you can still do things to enhance that and grow and change it, which you typically are in improv, like you would with a language or a musical instrument, so you can play it, but you're enhancing your practice, it's going to be fantastic.
So good for the brain, for the grey matter. Yeah. And
for all the other things, connection, laughter, connection and purpose, having fun, all those beautiful things.
Yeah, you've really inspired me, and I think I want to get back into improv now. Da, da, da. But also what a lot of people don't realise is the conversation is improv. So when you're having a conversation, you are improvising. Like we have a few bullet points down here, but we're not reading from scripts. And actually...
We've looked at one question.
Yeah, that's it. But I think it's more engaging for the listener as well when you're not reading or it's not too scripted.
Yeah, I hope so. If you're listening, do let us know in the comments or DM us. Be gentle and just let us know if you'd like a little bit more structure to our chats. We'll see what we do. Do you think that's a nice place to end it, Sally?
Yeah, I think that really is.
Again, we could go on, couldn't we? So maybe again we pick up this another time, and maybe if you are listening and you've had any thoughts about failure, you'd like us to talk about something specific, maybe you'd like to know a little bit more about the research, which I keep realising as we're riffing, we're probably not delving into that quite enough, which we can do in future episodes. Let us know and we can definitely cover this another time.
Yeah, amazing. I've loved it. So...
Thank you, Sally.
Onwards and upwards. I will see you next time, Serena.
See you next time.
Bye.